Dante Alighieri was born right here in the charming city of Florence, and his greatest work, The Divine Comedy, is being transformed into an action extravaganza by EA. And they've just got one thing to say to you: go to hell.
Welcome to the underworld, as imagined by an Italian chap in the 14th century. Yet so vivid, so harrowing and unforgettable have Dante's descriptions proved that a 14,000-line medieval poem is now embedded in the popular imagination of modern Western culture. Whether the audience realises it or not, its influence is there for all to see in movies, music, art, literature, and, of course, video games. But no one has attempted to make the game of the book since 1986, with Dante's Inferno on Commodore 64. 23 years later, EA's Dead Space team is raising the dead for an action game, served up with all the blockbuster trimmings, with Dante himself controversially reborn as a muscular gaming titan. Speaking of which, Kratos, remember him? A few anger management issues, a spot of God bothering on the side, and the star of one of the great action series. So much so that EA has plundered the formula wholesale for Inferno, betting heavily that its florid Florentine fighter, backed by Satan and the Lost Souls, is more than a match for Mr. Grumpy and his Olympians. For the grand unveiling of Dante's Inferno, we're in Florence, where else? Not just to play the game for the first time, but also to delve into the life and times of Dante Alighieri, to understand why EA reckons the people's poet will be right up gaming's strata.
The time is right, and there's some incredible universes that have been created by some of these great writers, and what we do well in video games is to create worlds, interactive worlds that come to life. You go there, you interact with it, you explore it. I could have spent 5 years trying to design the afterlife, and I would have still come up way short of Dante.
Florence is the capital of the Italian region of Tuscany, situated on the Arno River. It has a rich cultural history as the birthplace of the European Renaissance, where the great artists Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo plied their trade in amongst the uniquely magnificent architecture of the Duomo and the Ponte Vecchio.
Now, one thing that has to be said about those Renaissance artists, they sure did know how to sculpt a man's bottom.
Dante was born in Florence, loved his birthplace, and it looms large over the verses of the Divine Comedy, of which Inferno is the first part. Yet he didn't actually write it here.
Now, the Divine Comedy isn't just about some bird he fancied, it's also about revenge. And in 1302, poor old Dante was exiled from his beloved Florence after a rather spectacular falling out with the Pope. The sentence was passed in this building here, the Uffizi, and he was told if he ever came back, he'd be burned at the stake. Charming.
Indeed, he composed his greatest work away from home. And failing to clear his name during his lifetime, Dante popped his clogs before he could ever make it back.
Still in exile, Dante was buried in the city of Ravenna, and his remains never made the journey back to his hometown of Florence. However, here in the Piazza di San Croce, there's a monument to his life, where he's alongside the actual remains of some of the greatest people of the Renaissance, like Galileo, like Machiavelli, and that guy who was awesome with the nunchucks in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Today, Italy is immensely proud of its most famous literary son. Every child reads his poetry, he is their Shakespeare, and even gets his mug on the local currency.
See, only really important people get streets named after them. I quite like the sound of Minkley Road.
So, what on earth would the good people of Florence make of scythe-wielding action Dante?
That's a good question. I don't know. Ultimately, everyone will have their own reaction, and we're not too worried about it. But yeah, we're making a video game, and so we're going to take some liberties. There's a great audience of young people out there who are probably never going to read the poem, and this is a way to kind of get them interested in it.
So, having fixed on God of War as the gameplay model, and refashioned the author as a vengeful warrior, what will actually make the experience different?
In terms of kind of like delivering a unique kind of must-have experience, our focus has been on a few things. One is the ability to sort of tame and control these giant creatures of hell. That to me, just sort of levels up a little bit the feeling of power. And you know, a lot of the games currently in the genre, you know, they have some awesome monsters and bosses, but you sort of kill them and that's it. Secondly, I would say that you know, Dante's cross and his sort of holy powers. The cross has a strong narrative element. It was given to him by Beatrice. At the end of the day, the story, you know, which you're not seeing a lot of today, you're seeing mostly game mechanics, but I can tell you by the time this thing's done, the story is going to be very richly told, and you know, everything from just gorgeous cinematics down to narration and commentary, and you will feel like you are in the literature.
Sadly, with the game over a year away, we can't bring you any in-game footage yet, but in the flesh it's slickly impressive and atmospheric. And that's helped by character designs by Wayne Barlow, an artist with considerable Hollywood experience, and rather handily, a fascination with painting hell.
It's pretty undeniable, you know, the two of my passions kind of came together, the hell passion and the gaming passion. There are moments when you have breaks between work and you're doing your own work, and that happened to be one of them, and I'm always eager to put my own work aside to work on a show or a project like this. Yeah.
You can read our full interview with Barlow by hitting the red button. The game begins superficially as a story of revenge and rescue. Dante's beloved Beatrice is murdered by Death and her soul snatched and dragged into the underworld. Dante kills Death, takes his scythe and rushes after Beatrice through the gates of hell. Let's be honest, in terms of gameplay, like God of War, it's a button-mashing action game. But EA claims that Inferno will tackle complex themes. After all, the poem is ultimately a love story.
It's one of the great love stories of all time, and you know, I don't think that's too you know, too esoteric a theme for a video game. You know, everybody deals with love, right? So it should be in games. I hope that at the end of it, it sort of feels like you're fighting your way through this kind of interactive version of the literature, you know, and but in a way that doesn't get in the way of having a good time, you know, which is really what it's all about.
We'll worry about that later. For now, we're focusing on what we have seen. And what we've seen is already very slick and fun, but very similar to games we've played before. Especially that one with the major sequel that's due out later this year.
We had the same issues when we were making Dead Space, where we knew that Resident Evil 5 was going to be coming out in a few months. You don't know when the date is, you can remain paranoid about it, or you can just say, so I'm going to just make a great game.
And of course, there are two other parts of the Divine Comedy, Purgatory and Paradise. They certainly don't lend themselves to the God of War model quite as well as Inferno, but EA is already eyeing them up.
If you don't focus on the first one, you'll never make the second one. So that's you know, that's the truth. Focus on this one, and yeah, obviously we'd love to make, you know, all of them.
And finally, the big question. Could Dante take Kratos in a fight?
I'm not going to answer that.
You can read our detailed hands-on impressions of the game by hitting the red button. Dante's Inferno is coming to PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in 2010.
Still in exile, Dante was buried in the city of Ravenna, and his remains never made the long journey home to his hometown of Florence. However, here in the... Oh, fuck it, we've got it already, I can't be honest.